and welcome to Solar Insiders. My name is Sophie Forrest and I am the editor of Renew Economy. And joining me today, as always, is our wonderful lead reporter, Rachel Williamson. How are you, Rach?
I'm great, Soph. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Enjoying this little cold
No,
spell.
don't, don't, no.
No, I have to. You have to let me. It's cool, and I'm so
For
excited.
new listeners, we are not talking about the weather today.
Okay, fine, whatever.
Easter's coming up. It's going to be a long weekend.
Yeah, that's exciting. What we are talking about is our interview for this week, which is with the managing director of Indigo Power, which is this great community power. Well, they started off sort of mainly setting up community power and setting up a whole community with their own power. They've morphed into a retailer and doing all sorts of great things, including rolling out a bunch of community batteries, which are part of a regional resilience program, which really all started off the back of that awful Black Summer of fires, and all these communities being cut off from power for such a long time after such a traumatic experience. So it's a really, really interesting company, and we have a really great chat about the ins and outs. I think at one point he described a problem as it's a really interesting problem or exciting problem, I think he said. And I thought, well, there you go. That's why you do what you do, because you see problems as exciting, and things like installing a community battery, which does seem to be very tricky.
Challenging at the
Challenging.
best of times for a community.
Yes, and for
Yeah.
trying to deal with the networks and the costs and I think, to be fair to the networks, they're still getting their heads around a lot of it. So yeah, interesting. So let's hear from Ben McGowan, and then we'll come back and talk about the news of the week. This is Ben McGowan from Indigo Power. Ben McGowan, welcome to Solar Insiders.
Thanks for having me on.
It is a pleasure to have you here. We've got you here because last week you launched the first of a series of community batteries that you are rolling out as part of a regional resilience project that's been backed by ARENA. This one was in Beechworth, in Indigo Shire, which is where your company presumably gets its lovely name. So we're going to talk about that, but to start with, I thought we would hear a bit from you about your background, the origin story of Indigo Power, and before that, Totally Renewable Yakandanda.
Yeah, and where we got our name from is a little bit a part of that. It was actually when we started Indigo Power, before we incorporated, we brought all the community renewable energy groups from around where we are here in northeast Victoria, and brought them all together for about a year for a series of meetings about, we're setting up a community energy retailer. What should it look like? What should it do? And a part of that was picking a name. So we had Indigo Power, which was less about the Shire, although it's true that that's where our office is in Beechworth, which is Indigo Shire Council, and more about the Indigofera that flowers here across the region. It was also, the person who put it forward was also women's movement, the purple of the women's movement.
I love it.
Yeah, so that got up. My one was Peppermint Power, so that didn't that didn't win. People pick Indigo Power. And we've got the Indigofera, the beautiful sort of purple flowers, and the wattle as well. Which they both flower here at the same time of year, so they're quite beautiful, distinctive colours.
It's a very beautiful part of the world, Beechworth. I'm very fond of it.
Yeah. So that's the name. A little bit, that's a little bit about Indigo Power starting up, but yeah, Totally Renewable Yakandanda. I was not involved in establishing that organisation. I came in about a year or 18 months sort of afterwards. But if people remember, it was 2014, and we had a new Liberal government, and there was scrapping of this and scrapping of that, and it was a pretty depressing time for those who are tending to climate change and renewable energy
Yes.
and those sorts of things. So there was I think an energy there to not do something at the national scale, but work at the level where we do have an influence and we can have an impact, and that's the community working together at the community scale. And so that was Yak and Dander and 100% renewable energy target for the town. And I came along a little bit afterwards, and that's where Indigo Power came from. Is the community basically wanting to meet 100% renewable energy target, but having needing a different bit of corporate infrastructure, I guess, to do that. So try as an advocacy group. It's an incorporated association. We needed that connectivity function, which is retail, is to say, well, how do we connect ourselves to renewable energy assets? And also a capital raise sort of function is to say, well, how do we build some of these ourselves? How do we raise the capital and own some of this community scale infrastructure ourselves? So that was where Indigo Power came from, and we incorporated as a public unlisted company, which means we can have unlimited number of shareholders. So we have about 1,000 shareholders now.
Right.
And when we incorporated as well, we straight away in the constitution, we're a social enterprise, and then we certified straight away. So we've got provisions in the constitution that mean we're committed to our purpose. We're trading for a purpose, and that's to create a society powered by 100% renewable energy in a way that supports and empowers communities. So it's about the renewable energy, but it's also about, can we work with communities and deliver community outcomes at the same time?
Yep. I noticed on the website that it said that I think it was what have I got here? Our goal was simple: to power communities with 100% renewables, and I think that as a goal is simple, but I wonder whether simple is the word that you would use now, because I'm sure it's far from simple. But I mean, the concept, yes, simple, but yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of moving parts, and to be that sort of very important middleman that the retailer is and can be, must have its to have some knobs on.
Yeah, and I think interestingly enough, what we've set out to do hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
The core of what we want to do, which is to say we want to roll more community scale or household scale clean energy technologies out there.
Yeah.
We want to do that. 1. 2 is we want to have this, and this was all totally renewable Yak and Dander, 10 years ago sort of thing. Then we want to connect those together, connect the community together through this retail function. And, that's probably not going to be enough, working at the community scale, behind the meter, household solar, those sorts of things with a smart controller. We probably need to start adding a bit of scaled generation and storage as well. So that's the third thing. So that's when we started Indigo Power, we said, hey, we're going to do this.
Yep.
That's still what we're doing. But gosh, in terms of how we do it and the amount of practice we've had over, we incorporated Indigo Power in November 2018. So we've had a lot of practice now, and I think we're coming up with a method, I guess, of doing that in a way that I guess we can see how we can support community partners, so that we can be a little bit the toolbox in the background, and those community partners, the totally renewable Yak and Danders and Beechworths and so on and so forth, and further afield obviously as well, can say, well, you've got what we need in that toolbox. We've got the retail. We don't need to set up the retail. You can connect. You've done a lot of community batteries. You've done a lot of community scale work now. You can help us sort of design, and we can own these facilities, and we can connect through you to our communities so that we can deliver on a similar renewable energy and community development purpose as well. So we've had the same principles, but I think we've practiced a lot and learned a lot from and moved from I guess enthusiasts to knowing a fair bit about this sort of scale.
Learning by necessity.
Yeah.
Before we go on to the batteries, because I really want to talk about that in some detail, I guess I'd love to ask you too, because I think one of the main powerhouses behind Indigo Power and behind Totally Renewable Yakandanda has been the communities. We hear a lot in the city about how there's, some division in regions over renewables, that there's been some issues, particularly over large scale. Certainly some developers have handled things poorly. And then there's also groups that are, I guess you would say, opposed to large scale renewables in the regions and are really pushing that barrow. How is the feeling in your neck of the woods these days? Is that strong support still there?
Well, it's a good and interesting question. And for us, we stick to our knitting. We're a community organisation. We stick to the community scale. We're not out there trying to develop utility scale renewable energy. So we have a bit of a different, we're viewed through a bit of a different lens by the community. And if we talk about the community batteries we're delivering, very low amenity impact, and some pretty clear community benefits. So we talk about that later. So ours generally we're framed in a bit of a different way. Yes, you have some of those questions that you get elsewhere about fire safety and that sort of thing, and we've got good answers to those questions, so that's fine. So people accept that, and we haven't really had anything other than support for these projects we're delivering. More generally speaking, and I'm not a pollster or anything like that, but there is definitely some negative feeling, and I do get a little bit, at the Auskick and that sort of thing, why can't we all just do what you're doing, sort of thing? Why do we have to have this, big battery in our beautiful valley? And I think a lot of that is you get across the board. This is a general, like, I've lived in the country most of my life, and you do get a little bit of country city sort of stuff, like we're building this, this impact is sort of
we're shouldering it all.
We're shouldering it all, and it's for the bloody city, and why should we put up with that? And we've got bad healthcare, and we got all this sort of stuff, and so there's a little bit of that, and certainly I feel like it's probably at the end of all that rope's being used up. About reasonable people are now saying you can't just sort of say, oh, it's renewable energy, it's for the planet, sort of thing. Reasonable people are saying, well, why should our community
what's in it for us?
shoulder this burden? And I think that's where the renewable energy zones are a much better approach, where you are actually foregrounding that conversation right at the start. Before anything happens, you have a coordinated consideration of those perspectives and a considered and appropriate response. And I think that's happening just in time, because that's my feeling is that's what's required now to get so the transition can continue as it needs to.
Some frank and fearless conversations and lots of listening from the industry side, I think.
Yeah, and doing that in a coordinated way. I think government leadership there is absolutely critical now, because it's not that these projects don't happen. They do. They but they happen in a way where they're taken back to Melbourne and then get the minister's overrule, sort of thing. So they're happening, but more and more, even then, it's a finishing touch that really, really gets communities right off side. So you're building up all this political, political opposition, I guess.
Not for the people who, Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it's really interesting to hear that perspective from you, and it's good to know that you're there at Auskick.
Yeah.
Fighting the good
having
fight.
having the conversations. And
Yeah.
I think that's, the transition needs to happen across lots of different scales. And if we work at the community scale and we optimize that, and then we can talk a bit more about, virtual power plants and the lack of uptake in, people participating and all of that. But there's a really important message to say, hey, if we do our bit as communities really well,
Yeah.
then there's perhaps less of that that we need. So that's,
Yes.
important message to you.
On that very good segue, we'll head into the battery conversation.
Mm.
So yes, this. Well, first of all, I'll get you to tell us about this regional resilience project with the batteries, and then we can just get into some of the nitty gritty.
Yeah, and it's a little bit what's the backstory here as well, because we installed, one of the early community batteries with totally renewable Yakandanda, which was about renewable energy, and it was about 100% renewable energy target, and building, I guess, a community scale community battery, but sort of like a little community power plant sort of thing. It had solar on the new warehouse, Ben Gilbert's Agency of Sculpture workshop, and it had a 250 kilowatt hour battery, and it was all about supplying the Yak community with renewable energy. And we launched that in 2021, but at the same time, what was happening was, the 2019, 2020 bushfires is, the communities up around here were sort of burnt out, devastated by those bushfires. And one of the lessons from those communities, and I'm thinking particularly some of the communities we worked with, was, Snowy Valleys, Tumbarumba, in particular, which is southern New South Wales, and then across the border in Victoria, the Upper Murray, which is around Corryong. Those areas were badly burnt, but also they lost power for an extended period of time, so sort of 3 weeks.
We're suffering that awful isolation after such a big trauma.
Yeah, and I think they didn't quite realise, in terms of preparedness. I think communities kind of expect that there'll be power there at these critical community sites. That the ambulance and the CFA and the pharmacy doesn't get their scripts in the hospital and the evacuation centre and so on and so forth. So, and it wasn't necessarily there, and they couldn't. The bushfire goes through, and that's one thing, but then there's the period afterwards where they didn't have power, and perhaps people were trying to get their families out and that sort of thing. And the communications were down, the tap, the card tap wasn't working, they couldn't get cash out from the bank, all of that sort of stuff. So it was, and more in rural sort of regional communities, when you're talking about batteries, is sort of, and community batteries in particular, the first question is how much backup power does that give you? Because that's what's critical for these communities. So we were doing that work with those communities, and we delivered some more community batteries as a part of that at the relief centres and so on. And so we were having that lesson as well, is to say, well, there's an additional benefit that these community batteries can offer to the community, is to say the community, it kind of thinks that that's perhaps been covered, that the relief centre has, long backup storage, so that when everyone turns up afterwards, it's covered, but that's not necessarily the case. So delivering big batteries at these sites has another community benefit. So we took both of those two things, and we're lucky to win a little bit of federal government funding. It was called the Regional Remote Communities Reliability Fund, which is all about sort of edge of grid reliability sort of stuff in rural communities. And we looked all across northeast Victoria and southern New South Wales, and we were looking for sites that had that community benefit. So typically the relief centre, so that it's useful to put a community battery there. We were looking for sites that had a lot of roof space, because behind the meter community batteries typically you've got a really big network charge in the middle of the day, so you can't really import when you'd like to from an environmental perspective under the solar curve. You have to put solar on the site, so you need a big a lot of roof space to charge these big batteries, and then you have a cost saving you can make if the site already has a really strong connection to the grid. Has a big a big connection. It's on its own transformer typically, and I guess the good news is that those things can align quite well, can be quite well correlated, because if the relief centre is normally the showgrounds or something like that, and the showgrounds once a year will use a thumping great amount of electricity, but so it's got a huge connection. Rest of the time not so much, so you can make use of that connection.
Lots of shed roof space and stuff.
Exactly right. So that's where we ended up, is to say, and we also, Nick did a power of work around all the different community battery types and all the analysis and that sort of thing. And really where we landed was that the behind the meter batteries, if you could, I guess, diversify your revenue stream and say sell some power to the local council, for instance, behind the meter, and you could also connect it to Indigo Power's retail business, then that was probably, from a financial perspective, the best approach. So we ended up with a long list of sites, and then we submitted that to ARENA, obviously, with that story about its energy resilience, and community batteries. And we all know that I think the conversation about community batteries, it wasn't at the start about, it was sort of more about, network, how do we just sort of sexy electricity stuff, and how do you arbitrage and network support and all this sort of stuff, and over the course of that feasibility study and showing up to those conferences and that sort of thing, and sort of saying how about this as well, the conversation has turned a little bit. It's now can include things like we're doing a bit more work with energy resilience with local councils and that sort of thing. Which is fantastic.
It seems like a no-brainer to me, if this is how, like, one of the ways that you can engage regions and say, this is how we're giving back, or this is how we're trying to make sure it works for you as well, is to give you this resilience. But, as you say, the neighbourhood / community battery story has its own sort of controversy, I guess, because since the Albanese government's had their program supporting it, and it has been a lot of funding going to networks and having them put them where they need them on their distribution grid, which, there are plenty of arguments in favour of that. But, how difficult is it for a community organisation like yours to sort of get a share of the pie, and is it absolutely dependent on funding?
The price of batteries is coming down more and more, and I think one of the big investments you make as well is, you speak to the local council and it's like, what the hell is this sort of thing? And so that's probably a really big investment, that you've got, you're presenting to executive, 3 and 4 times, and the councillors, a few times, and you're sort of really making this big investment in sort of explaining the concept and that sort of thing. So as those two things improve, it becomes a little bit more, here are the ones we've already done, it's working well, and they become a little bit more familiar as to say, oh yeah, of course we should think about that. And the price of batteries comes down, then it does become more commercial and require less government support, I guess, is the first thing. The second thing is say, how hard is it? It's hard, and this is sort of to say, well, what can our role be? Because especially someone like ARENA's looking to, I guess, invest in a certain a certain outcome, and that's the way they look at things, and they're very rigorous. And perhaps so they ought to be. So as a result, we've got an electrician with 20 years experience who's now got 3 and 4 years experience with community batteries. We've got a PhD mathematician doing our analysis with all the U-Beauty software and that sort of thing. But so we can do that, but one of the community groups, of course, a volunteer community group can't. So the question for us a little bit is, how can we and the other thing to say, I guess, as well, is that volunteer, that incorporated association, or that community looking to invest in something and set up a little company, invest in something, they don't have the I guess capacity to manage the risk of participating in the wholesale market and those sort of things. And you're investing, you don't really want to invest into something and just have it sort of going up and down on the spot market, hoping for the best sort of thing. So I guess our thinking is, how can we support with some of the design and financial modeling for the battery, but I think as importantly is to say, how can we be the partner that the community places that risk with us, and we can turn that risk into, say, hey, we've got to supply our customers, and we want to sign up some customers in your local community. We will pay you a fixed price for that battery, so you're getting the certainty of you want for your investment, and we can perhaps lease that equipment off you, and we can use that as a part of our hedging strategy. So those are the sort of things we're starting to do now. Because it's really difficult to win funding through ARENA. It's easier through the I think the Victorian government and the 100 neighbourhood batteries program has had taken quite a sympathetic view and supported communities to have a go and experiment, which is great. But the long answer is, that's a long answer, but the short answer is you're competing, as you can see, with those ARENA funds with Origin and the big incumbents, and their applications are probably pretty well resourced, and that's who they're comparing against. So
I know that ARENA in the federal one had a bit of a carve out that was specifically supposed to be for community, but it was a little carve out compared to the.
Well, the co-contribution as well is also important. Like you have to, your company has to make a co-contribution, which we really, as a part of this ARENA funded project, we had to raise $1.25 million, which was really difficult. And speaking to the bank about what was a community battery and how does it repay the investment that the bank makes, and then going out for a community capital raise as well was one of the difficult parts of getting this project going as well.
Not something that your regional bank managers are that familiar with compared to stock and things like that.
No, and what we ended up doing, so it was with the local community bank, was Bank WAW. What we ended up doing is calling for community supporters to put up their cash in term deposits to secure the loan. So they got an uplift in their term deposit rate, but they're basically backing the loan through cash term deposits. So we had some amazing supporters put up sort of it was an $800,000 loan, so $800,000 of cash is sitting there in the bank.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. Securing this loan. So it was that journey I mean, there was the arena journey and satisfying arenas requirements and making the case to arena, but there was also, well, once we had the funding, the grant, the conditional grant funding, we then had to go through this second process of finding our bit, which was also very demanding.
I'll add at this point that I happen to know you have 3 children and a functioning marriage, so congratulations. You're doing an amazing job, Ben.
Well, yeah, look, and that's it was difficult, but I think one of the wonderful things about the community energy sector and there's a lot of support across the other organisations who are doing this sort of work, and we've got wonderful shareholders as well, and when we put that call out, they answered.
Yep.
And so things, and we're also a wonderful volunteer board and
Yep.
and so on and so forth. So for a company of our scale, it's those are big challenges. $1.25 million is a lot of money, but
Yep.
I guess as you go along, you get the challenge gets a little bit bigger, and you meet that, and you're up to the next scale. Then, and you can do the next thing then.
Yes, and as you mentioned, the bank of knowledge that you're building up as a group must be really invaluable, and to be able to share that with other people in the future will be so important. Yeah. I want to quickly ask you about how it's been working with the network companies. I know that that's a big part of this, and organising connection and where to put the battery and all of that. And I think in Victoria you work with AusNet, and New South Wales it's Essential Energy, and I think you're about to branch into Queensland, which it's amazing. So yeah, how's that been? Is it are you finding they're helpful and coming to the table well and everything?
Yeah, so we've got the Community Batteries for Energy Resilience project. It will be about 5 megawatt hours or something like that of storage,
Right.
and I forget exactly how much solar, but maybe 700 kilowatts or something like that, and two megawatts of battery power as well. So that's what we're connecting. And we're practicing with the network, I think is the best way to put it. So when we put our first community battery in the AusNet distribution area, that was at Yarra Junction. That was a couple of years ago, I guess, that we were installing that one. There was a first community battery on their network, and they didn't have the one in Yakandanda was an early example, and we just sort of, so those the Yarra Junction one was the first one of the, I guess, the current round of the all the batteries that are starting to happen now through the different government funding programs. But that was a lot of there wasn't really a process, and there wasn't good communication between the new connections team, which just sort of saw this battery as a 100 kilowatt load, and we had to pay for a new transformer and that sort of thing. And then after that was finished, you spoke to the distributed energy resources sort of connection team, and that's a different conversation.
Okay.
And I think after that process and a bit of a review of that, then they're now, thank goodness, set up a process and talking to each other. And what it means for us is that what we were sort of hoping for and asking for that first time is now something that's there, and that's to say, well, it's a community battery. It doesn't need to. It's not going to export between at 10 and 3. Our times of high solar production and penetration to the grid. So by design, it's not going to do that. Also, by design, it's not going to import, at 5 o'clock in the evening. That's when it's going to be exporting to that demand. So we're now getting connection agreements that say, hey, you can connect the battery, but you can't import between 10 and 3, and you can't import. You can't export between 10 and 3, and you can't import between, say, whatever, 3 and 9 or something like that. That's
kind of the whole point of the battery. I mean, that's why you have it, so that it can soak it up during the middle of the day and put it out into the peak periods. And I think I wouldn't want to speak for you, but I suppose the frustration for a lot of people with the argument for batteries has been that it can do a lot to alleviate some of the issues for network companies, like it can actually be a significant benefit and help them to avoid augmentation of the grid and costly upgrades, etc. So that should be factored in to things like the price of connection.
Yeah, the networks move very slowly, and we are starting to see some of the Victorian ones publish. I haven't studied further afield, but starting to publish small sort of non-network support opportunities, which is great. Which means, that when people started talking about community batteries, 3 or 4 years ago, whenever all that grant funding was announced, it was one of the that was really foregrounded, the network support opportunity, but it's sort of taken really until now for the networks to advertise meaningful opportunities. So that those are there now, and you can plan to install battery capacity to address those. So that's a nice development. I think as well. Whereas when we were doing the feasibility study, which I think started in, 2021 or something like that, we didn't have good grid visibility.
Yeah.
Subsequently, most network providers now have sort of some sort of grid view capability that you can log on and have a look at. Okay, we're thinking we're thinking about putting the battery here. What's the load on that transformer? Oh, I can see that transformer. It's got heaps of capacity. Okay, great. Well, they're not going to reject it. So we can see all the ones we're installing under this ARENA funded project. They've got big connections to the grid. We've installed, we've reviewed, the local network and looked at the transformer to see what capacity is on that transformer. And so these connection agreements are sort of just, they've got to go through the process, obviously, but there's no network upgrade. It's all just going sort of, smoothly, because they've given us those tools to do the work, so that we're not putting dud applications in and just kicking the tires. We're really confident that when we put an application in, it's they're gonna accept that there's going to be no network upgrading or connection upgrade required. So
false starts and
and less investment on their path. They're just reviewing good applications rather than having conversations about how about this side, how about that side, sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay. On moving on to the retail side of things, obviously you guys are what you would describe as an alternative retailer and offering this connection to community-based resources and this commitment to, you invest, I think, 50% of your profits back into community projects and, walk the talk. But it's a notoriously difficult game in Australia, retailing. I think it's a difficult game anywhere, really, but there's a huge amount of competition in Australia and a lot of moving parts and moving of the goalposts, I guess. And I thought it'd be great to hear some of your views on the debates recently about, I guess, things like the loyalty tax and the recent sort of proposal from the AMC to introduce higher fixed network tariffs. as a way of I guess their approach is that this is going to make things more fair for people who haven't been able to afford to put solar and batteries in and that kind of thing. And I get it, but it's a very contentious subject. How are things in the retail space for you guys?
Yeah, retail is difficult, absolutely, and really, we're obviously a purpose-driven company, and our purpose is not to run a big retail business. It's deliver on our purpose. So for that reason, we sort of outsource and get a little bit of help. So we partner with Next Business Energy on some of the back end systems and that sort of thing. So we get a little bit. Otherwise, we'd have to invest in a compliance officer and the metering team and on and on and on. So we share those resources, which helps, but the risk still sits with us. So we need to manage that risk and offer fair prices to our customers. And one of our big focuses at the moment is I guess working across the community sector and trying to speak with others out in this space that also doing similar sort of stuff and get some alignment where we can offer some value. And that's talking to some of these other bigger community aligned organisations and trying to bring a little bit of a coalition together, because we've all been practicing in the space for a long time. You think of Hepburn Energy and some of those ones that have been around for a very long time. So how do we work together is a focus, but clearly for us, our target audience is people that care about what we're doing. So we're not going to be
the most competitive.
No, we're not going to be trying to win every customer. It's sort of to say if this community, this social enterprise, this community ownership is doing good things in our local communities using renewable energy is appealing, we're looking to work with that customer, and we can offer then a few things that others don't necessarily. So you mentioned the ACCC is great. It's always doing reviews about the retail sector and that sort of thing. It's a great source of information if people want to learn more about the retail sector. But one of the things we don't do, which is I think it must be a great way to win customers, because a lot of others do, is to have a great big hundreds of plans. Have the ones you advertise out in the market that are really low, and then cross subsidize those with plans that people have been on for a long time that are quite uncompetitive,
and then you just get quietly switched onto without knowing.
First. And there's really interesting stuff that the ACCC sort of is, when because they're the ones who can get their hands on. Everyone else can see what's publicly published, but the ACCC can go in and say, actually, you've got to give me all your customers what actual plans are they actually on, and what sort of say. Well, most a lot of, I forget exactly what the numbers are, but a lot of people are on worse plans than the default offer.
Huge amount, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of those are concession and hardship customers. A lot of them are on those big discounts that if you miss them you're on toast sort of thing. So
it's always going to be the people who are less engaged, probably through no fault of their own, that are going to suffer from these things.
And there's it's a focus area for governments, obviously, but that's one of the things as a community owned company and as hopefully a trusted company, is to say, well, we're not going to have that price that sits on top of those comparison sites. But what is you're on the same price that I'm on. You're on the same price. Everyone's on. We've got different plans, but they're the best plan we can offer people depending on their needs. So you don't have to swap around every year. You just know what you're getting. You're getting our best price. Network tariffs. Yeah, the AEMC review that's happening at the moment I'm probably following that the same way you are. The articles are sort of thrown up, and you sort of digest information that way. And I know I ought to be attending to that quite closely, because
I'm sure you have
it's the big
somebody who is in their company, but
yeah,
yeah,
it's
look,
Nick. Yeah,
it's still at the very early stages, and it's been a draft proposal, but yeah, it just seems like there still needs to be quite a bit of discussion on it, and I think this we make a mistake too often in this industry of sort of trying to make it black and white when there are so many shades of grey, and I think that's the real key, because as you were saying before, things move so quickly, and with all of the new technology coming in and all of everything that's going on, the changes are coming thick and fast. So it's not, it's not about being angry that people aren't keeping up, because it's quite difficult to do that. But we've got to be much more flexible in our thinking, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting. A few of the things I think about, because it's easy. I mean, one of the conversations we have with people often is, "You've reduced your feed-in tariff, you're ripping us off," sort of thing.
Right.
Which was sort of maybe 3 years ago, sort of thing. I think people have generally, there was a conversation there about, well, actually, what's happening is that you've got more and more solar entering the market. The certificate price is at whatever, so you're getting these negative prices through the market. And actually, what was always happening for us, because we got heaps of people with solar, obviously. What was always happening for us is we were actually losing money on every solar customer we had, because they were exporting huge amounts, and we had a pretty decent feed-in tariff, and it wasn't really worth anything. So I think so that's one sort of, I just guess my point is, it's important to have these conversations and not shy away from them, and bring people along. And one of the Nick, who does our pricing and is our analyst, was, the question that, we have these pricing principles, and one of them is, fairness, and fairness, is about sure that that not never having a loyalty tax type thing, but it's also about, well, we can't make money off people who don't have solar, so we can subsidize people who do have solar. So there's that conversation we're having internally, is to say, well, how do we set our pricing so that it's fair? And I think that's a little bit the AEMC. When they're having that conversation, they're putting forward ideas like the that higher daily standing charge. I think that's partly where they're coming from. So they are. And the other similar one, which I'll just throw in there, is the network tariff pricing, in regional versus cost reflective pricing would look like your network charges were super low in the city, but really thumping high in the country, because you've got hundreds of kilometres of line, few people on them. So there is a cross subsidy that happens from the city to the country in terms of network tariffs. So all these sort of fairness, social sort of.
It's on so many levels, isn't it?
Yeah. So they're difficult. They're difficult conversations to have. But I think it's right to say, you don't want to put the handbrake on everyone who's making these investments in their own renewable energy resources, but you don't, at the same time, you don't want to have tariffs that are unfairly benefiting those people at the same time. So I mean, it's the right time for that conversation, and it's the right time to be talking about, well, one of the difficulties we have is the spot price is really low in the middle of the day, but that's not always the case with the network tariff. So you're sort of trying to send a signal over the top of a different signal that the network's sending. So, some of these sort of conversations, it's the right time to have them. But, as we've sort of talked about, in 5 years' time, 5 years ago, you couldn't have predicted, the amount of solar, and certainly the networks weren't. They had these 5-year network tariff cycles, right? And the modelling they had back for the last one was sort of way off the mark in terms of the solar surge.
I know.
Really
and you throw in the
came
battery
through.
rebate now, and that's going to change things again.
It's huge.
So yeah, it's really on the run policy making and regulation. So yeah, all of the conversations need to be had. I did notice that you have an offer that looks a bit like the solar sharer thing that's about to come in federally, where you have an energy shaper, which seems to be a bit similar, where it's sort of about power in the middle of the day.
Yeah, look, and you know so we've got ours is a bit longer. It's 5 hours instead of 3 hours. And we've got a time of use feed-in tariff as well. It sends the same signal. It's to say, well, if you've got solar as well, use your solar in the middle of the day, and if it's at the shoulders, you can export it and get a better rate, especially in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's. I think those offers are out there already. I don't like. We're gonna have to set up another offer, which is exactly the default offer. One now, which will be probably, we don't want to offer a 3-hour free slot. We want to offer something that's a lot longer, because that's the plan I'm on, and I've got 2 electric vehicles and 3 little kids, and we're all over the place, and to get everyone 3 hours, we're gonna get there. It just never happens. So you have a little bit of extra time to get an hour of charge here and there is of value. So,
well, I think that's been one of the really interesting points that's been made in this debate about tariffs, is for the networks to have a bit more flexibility and give retailers more scope to be more creative with their offers. So to then say, yes, everyone's needs are different. We're never going to come up with something that is going to suit, 90% or even 50-50. It's just not going to work that way. We need to have retailers that can offer, even if it's just 3 things that would suit the majority of customers.
And the network tariffs drive pricing. They're a major chunk. 30-40% of your retail bill. So what the way their underlying structure, the way they set tariffs, it's and most retailers, it's easier to take that underlying network tariff and add your costs, and then you just end up with that same tariff built out, rather than doing the difficult mess saying cross subsidize.
Doesn't leave you much room to be creative.
No, so having network tariffs that are, if we're talking about 3 hours of free power in the middle of the day, obviously it's much easier to offer free power if you're not having to subsidize. If the network tariff is 0, for instance, at that time, and you can set your electricity wholesale rate at 0, rather than the network tariff being 6 cents or something like that, and you having to set your prices at negative 6 cents to counteract that.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot to think about, and thank goodness we have people like you thinking about it, and your team. We will wrap it up here, but I would love to touch base with you again soon and hear how the Beechworth battery is going once it's and to hear what further lessons that you're learning from this, because I think it's going to be hugely valuable.
Well, we've had, I think, a fair bit of practice delivering the batteries, and now we've got the practice. I think we've got 2 megawatt hours of storage now out in community scale storage, and so it's pretty material in relation to our retail load. So we're now going through the process of saying, well, how do we what's the best alignment with our retail portfolio? How are we going to actually use these community batteries to manage our retail risk, which is the next exciting problem to solve.
I like that you think it's an exciting problem.
It is. There's some beautiful
attitude,
beautiful maths, and some technical sort of risks and so on and so forth. So it's a meaty one.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time to speak to us and to hear all of your views. It's been really, really interesting. And yeah, we'll talk again soon. But thank you so much for joining us, Ben.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sophie.
That was Ben McGowan from Indigo Power. It really was such an interesting chat with him. I don't know how he does it all, and with 3 children, I know he probably has a very hardworking team as well, and yeah, but a lot of work going into all of that, and it's really great to see that community up in Northeast Victoria has been, in the sort of Indigo Shire and the federal seat of Indi has been really pretty well known for being very renewables forward and really embracing it. And Yakandanda has had that totally renewables Yakandanda. I can never say that in one go, which is how Indigo Power started. It's just done this amazing, amazing job. So it's really good to see, and it's good to hear too, as you have done recently, Rach, what the feeling is on the ground out there about renewables. Obviously, it's a different thing having the solar and the batteries, but yeah, it's interesting to hear how people are feeling about it all, and that there are some hard conversations happening in Auskick. Apparently. Now, news of the week. We've had another crazy political week here. We've got a new leader of the National Party, so that's a clean sweep for the LNP. We have Matt.
This is going to be a year.
It
It's
is
going to
gonna
be
be
a very interesting year.
It is. Matt Canavan is our new leader of the Federal National Party. Notoriously, can we say it, hates renewables. Isn't a fan of the cheaper home batteries rebate. It says it's middle class welfare on steroids. Yeah, despite the fact that all the data shows that really it's been going great in the regions. It's being installed by 250,000 households, so they can't all be, you wouldn't think. Anyway, I don't know how much more I have to say about that, to be honest, Rachel. I don't really feel like talking about Matt Canavan.
Well, all of the news is yet to come out of that marriage between Angus Taylor and Matt Canavan. The news is yet to come this year.
I did note that Barnaby, everyone's other favourite renewables hater, said that he thought that Matt and his deputy, Darren Chester, who's the member for Gippsland, where it's all happening, and I would, imagine you have to have a much more flexible attitude to renewable energy in Gippsland than others might. He said that he doesn't think that they're on the same policy page, so that'll be interesting as well. We shall see. On the more consumer level, you had an interesting story this week about a retailer who has dumped gas.
Yeah. So little retailer, Discover Energy, 4 years ago, you may remember another little war, Ukraine war, sent fossil fuel. Yes, still happening. Sent fossil fuel prices rocketing, wholesale electricity prices rocketing, and a range of little retailers had to write to their customers and say, "We're really sorry, but we're going to go out of business if we don't radically hike your electricity and gas rates." And so Discover took this as an opportunity to say, we're going to focus on VPPs and decarbonisation. We're going to lean more into what we're doing in the VPP space, and decarbonisation space. Exactly. And this year, in a piece of exquisite timing, last week the energy market regulator said, yes, you're allowed to drop your gas license, because they say gas is no longer part of our vision. We are now solar, renewables, VPP first. We're not fossil first.
The thing with these little retailers is they don't have the, huge teams that are constantly working out the futures markets and doing a whole lot of, clever stuff and have a lot of basically insurance to ride the prices like this. And with gas at the moment, it's just so volatile, and that is really, we can say it, first world problem, considering what some of these people are going through in war-torn regions of the world. But if you can avoid it, why wouldn't you? Is probably what the message is. And it really does drive home in inconvenient timing for a lot of renewable energy objectors and deniers, because yes, it really does drive home that we need to accelerate our energy independence,
Yeah.
household level and at the national level. Indeed. And
Energy sovereignty,
that's
as
right.
the nuclear power cohort argues.
Okay.
Or we can do it already, can't we?
Well, perhaps Nat will start rubbing uranium on his face instead of coal. Who knows? Who knows? He did do that. I mean, with the coal. Yeah. But
I'm looking forward to some more coal antics in Parliament.
well, he
in
has
federal
said
Parliament.
that he's going to be a different Matt as the leader, and not be so. I don't know what you may.
Well, you can't be as flamboyant when you're the leader. You've got to be the
Steady the ship.
forte.
Yes,
Exactly.
that's right.
You've got to leave the theatrics to someone else. And I'm interested to see who is going to carry
Look,
the flag.
maybe this is the right thing. Maybe this is when you make the class clown the head prefect, and suddenly he's like realizes all his untapped potential. I don't know. Maybe. That's entirely enough time spent on the national park. And other news, we have a new Victorian default market offer. Again, inconvenient timing for a lot of the haters, because the news is that prices are coming down, I think, across all of the jurisdictions and in all of for businesses, for homes. Not a massive drop, but down, not up, down. And Victoria, cops a lot of flack for its government, and potentially rightly so in many departments. But I will stand by the fact that I think Lily D'Ambrosio has been an amazing energy minister, and this vision that she has had and has nursed through for a decade or more has been very good. And yeah, there's obviously lots more work to do, and offshore wind's still this big mountain to climb. But yes, prices have come down, and that is in a state which has a decent share of renewables, and a decent mix of wind and solar, and has been pretty good as far as encouraging rooftop solar uptake. So we had our state rebate for batteries well before there was a national one. Didn't fare so well, but yeah, the small scale renewable energy scheme in Victoria, well, it's not called that, but the solar households, solar homes, has been amazing, and has set a lot of the groundwork for a lot of the rebates around the country. So yes, big ups to Victoria. Who knows how long it will last with the crazy stuff that's happening.
I know.
But for the moment, and look, again, this is a government that is saying, let's get houses out of gas. Could potentially do it a lot faster than it has done it, but it's doing it, and it's gone where other governments, New South Wales, have fear to tread. So again, credit to them. And yes, I think heading in the right direction. I think
I, for one, am excited to see just how quickly my retailer sends that letter after this news saying this is what the rates are going to be.
it might be a bit similar to the banks and the rates, where it's like, sorry, what? Oh, was there? Yeah, I don't know.
Mm. They were
Maybe
very
like
quick last year to send out that letter, but we'll see
yeah.
how quick they are this year.
Mm. Well, look, it's a pretty small one, and it's the default market offer. So, as we've explained, that applies to kind of a pretty small cohort in the energy mix, but it does tend to set the price for the rest of the market and set the mood, and encourage other retailers to be a bit more attractive in what they're offering. So that's really good. There's so much um, on offer out there. There's a lot of competition in the retail market. So I would urge everyone with this news to check what plan you're on. Make sure it's the best plan. Talk to your current retailer. Look around. Do the energy compare thing, which is really simple. And worth doing. I did it last week actually, just out of interest. And it's good because the offer I'm on is still the best one for me. But it's extra important now that we all have different bits of kit, like I've only got solar, I haven't got a battery or an electric vehicle. So this is what is the best deal for me, but it wouldn't be the best deal for someone, say, that has a battery or has an electric vehicle or has neither. It's just wanting to electrify and be energy efficient. So yes, very important to check that and keep up to date on what the best plan for you is. And what other news have we, Rachel? Anything else? You did a bit of a report on a community power agency. I guess it was a proposal on how better to do things.
Yeah, a bit of a proposal, bit of a kind of a flag in the sand, if you like, where they outlined 9 different ways that renewable energy developers could partner with communities rather than just see them as another stakeholder to consult with. And so when I say that, normally, let's say you might go into a community and say, okay, here's our information session. Here's what we want to do here. Please give us your feedback.
Here's
And
some
what
money.
here's some money. Yeah, no. And what they're saying instead is, okay, we're going to bring you in as a co-investor or a co-owner or some kind of
Contra
like
deal or something.
real,
Mm.
a real stake in the project. Something that the Community Power Agency says is, it's policy in Denmark.
Right.
And yeah, it's policy that, if you're going to build a wind farm, you need to give the community a stake, a financial stake in it. And, it's saying if we want to get from 50% renewables in the national energy market now to 82% in 2030, developers need to start doing things. Yeah, 4 years. Developers need to start doing things differently. And this is a way to not only bring communities in, you potentially sidestep a lot of community opposition, which, can reduce your planning timeframes. And some developers that have dipped a toe into this idea already are finding that it's cutting planning timeframes. Because instead of doing, all of this work and then going to the community's in there and says, maybe don't put it there.
Yeah.
That's going to cause you problems. Maybe don't put it there. There is a great place. And so you just sidestep a whole heap of issues by
Tapping
bringing people in.
knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it seems very obvious when you say it. Like, it seems.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously, I think you often hear, you read in some of the comments and the objections submitted to environmental impact statements. This foreign company and all these people from such and such, and most of the big companies developing renewables are not based in Australia, let's face it. But it would certainly help that too. They often have, obviously, their Australian operations, but bringing people in and getting them involved from the start and giving them skin in the game would make it feel less like this entity coming in from outside and just doing what they please and raking in all the profits while the community sweats it over the small stuff.
Yep. And instead of saying, we're going to give you a pot of money for community benefits, say, we're going to give you a pot of money as your dividend.
Yep.
and that is your community benefit. And then suddenly, it's like anything. You have a stake in this
Yeah.
and doing really, really well.
And
So
it makes it seem,
just changes things a bit.
it does, and it makes it seem more like it's an active asset. Like, I think these things can get installed and then people see them as this sort of thing in their landscape, in their view. But these are active assets that are generating electricity, and they're part of the market, and they're a business model.
Yeah.
So if you're part of that, that probably also helps to make it seem less of a imposition.
And it taps back into this idea that I think Angie pioneered it with its now defunct wind project near Hay in New South Wales. They said, we're going to give you a bill rebate. And now this bill rebate is pretty common as an offer from renewable energy developers. And that's just another way of giving people skin in the game and saying, okay, well, you can see the benefit that's coming from
tangible,
this project.
ongoing benefit that isn't just sort of, oh, we'll do up your sports stadium and
As people say, there's only so many coats of paint a local hall can take.
yes, exactly. Alrighty, well, I think that's it for this week. It's been a great chat again, and I want to thank our listeners and our readers and our sponsors, Pylon and Fronius, as always. And we will see you again next week for another episode of Solar Insiders. Until then, have a great week, and thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Soph.
Bye for now.